Welcome to the Essentially You podcast. Dr. Kara Fitzgerald, how are you doing today, girl?
Great. It's really nice to be with you.
It is so wonderful. I am so excited for our conversation today. And we're going to be talking, I think, what a lot of women would love to know more about, which is how do we extend our biological age? Is that even possible? Like, what does that look like in terms of, creating longevity or how we can stave off chronic conditions for a lot longer? But before we get into kind of the nuts and bolts of your brilliance, what I would love to do is have you just start off with, what was the impetus for you, or what was that defining moment when you decided that you wanted to go into functional medicine, that you really wanted to focus on longevity and improving or increasing our biological age?
hmm Well, those are different
Oh,
actually, there's
yeah.
quite a bit of time between my decision to focus on functional medicine and then my entry into studying epigenetics and biological age. There's a lot of years between those, but I became enamored of functional medicine and nutritional biochemistry when I saw Dr. Jeff Bland lecture. When I was a student, I was absolutely enamored. So some of your audience might know that Dr. Jeff Bland is the father of functional medicine.
Mhm.
He and his wife started the Institute for Functional Medicine, where I'm faculty and have been faculty for the last decade plus. Um, let's see. And then, so I finished my uh, medical degree. I'm a naturopathic physician by training, and I was fortunate to get a postdoc position in a laboratory under the direction of a nutritional biochemist. So functional medicine is pretty geeky. We're trying to translate the science into actionable interventions for our patients. And so I was there working with a highly regarded nutritional biochemist in the functional medicine space named Dr. Richard Lord. Um, and part of that was lecturing at IFM on laboratory science at the Institute for Functional Medicine. So it was just this incredible full circle. Dr. Jeff Bland became a near and dear mentor to me. So in my early years, I was introduced and fell in love with functional medicine and got the importance of that model of medicine, at my first steps into my career. And it definitely dictated what I did and how my career played out. Epigenetics, and which is how we measure biological age, and I'll define all of that in a second. I think I was well positioned given my postdoctorate training in a lab and focused on nutritional biochemistry. So I was well positioned to be thinking about epigenetics. But it was a program that we designed for our clinic. And based on my read on the literature, that we ended up being able to study. So we were able to conduct a randomized controlled clinical study looking at our diet and lifestyle intervention and how it influenced epigenetics. Again, I need to define these, but our first finding, and the thing that just brought so much attention to us, to our clinic, to my practice, I wrote a book about it, was the fact that we were able to see in our study group a biological age reversal of over 3 years as compared to our control group. And then we followed up with a later publication where we showed the same thing in women. Actually, the women did a little bit better. They were able to reverse their biological age using our intervention by over 4 years. And this was just
Wow.
in 8 weeks' time.
Wow.
Yeah. So epigenetics is specifically interested in looking at what genes are on and what genes are off. So we're not looking at the DNA itself, but we're looking at the little biochemical marks that kind of sit on top of the DNA and influence what's on and what's off. And we obviously want the best genes on and we
Yeah.
want the worst genes off. And our program was designed to do that. And the way that we measure the rate at which our body's aging, our biological age, not our chronological age, which we can't change, but the way that we actually measure the physiologic journey of aging is by looking at these little biochemical marks, these genes, the patterns of genes being on and off. And so it was, extremely exciting to us to discover that we had been able to reverse biological age. it, we were the second, maybe the third study ever to demonstrate that. So this is just new knowledge that we're working from. And we were the first randomized control study to demonstrate biological age reversal. And we were the first diet and lifestyle intervention to demonstrate that. So a lot of kind of extraordinary firsts. And, now, as you know, it's in very rapid succession because we just published our study in 2021. It's something that we're talking about all the time, isn't it? It's rather amazing. So let me just take a pause there and let you kind of unpack that or ask
Yeah.
me some questions.
One of the first things that came up to my mind is, in looking at epigenetics and the power of lifestyle change we can have on how our genes are turned on and turned off. But the thing that I was most fascinated, so I want to get into that in terms of, kind of what types of lifestyle modifications are helping to move us in that right direction in terms of reversing biological age. But then also I was super fascinated to hear that women fared better. And I was just curious, because this is a woman's show. This is, and
Go
I'm just
ladies.
always interested. I know here are two women. I started my career out in research as well, but not in functional medicine. I started in actually a nuclear arms lab. I was a biochemist for looking into mitochondrial mRNA. But that was a different time in my life. That was how I started my journey ultimately into medicine. But I'm just so fascinating to hear. Was it that the lifestyle modifications were just more beneficial on women's bodies, or were women more consistent? I don't know if you guys were able to walk away with any kind of big insights there.
That's awesome. That's a great question. And it sounds like a really badass career origin for you. That's really interesting to me. Well, as much as I want to give the ladies a lot of credit for just responding better to the intervention, what I have to say, there's a little asterisk after
Sure.
that, is that it's not quite an apples to apples comparison. So in our first study, we used saliva as the specimen. We used the same biological age clock, but we used saliva as the specimen. And in the second study, or it was a case series, we used blood. Blood is currently the better specimen for biological age. And we used two different labs. So in our original study, we needed to use a research laboratory. So we sent our specimen to Yale, and they did them here in Connecticut, where I live, because there weren't clinical labs available to do this kind of testing.
Because it was new.
That's exactly
it was
right.
So new.
It was so new, and it wasn't that long ago. It's kind
Yeah.
of crazy, but it wasn't. So Yale processed them. We used saliva. In our second, we used blood, and they were processed by a commercial clinical laboratory. And so for those reasons, it's not quite fair to say complete hats off to the ladies. I think both populations adhered to the program really well. One of the things that we did in both, and we continue to do in our group programs, is we have people connect with a nutritionist at least weekly, so that they're really engaged in the program. We're not giving them a set of instructions and then sort of pushing their boat from shore. Yeah, exactly. Adherence is huge. Really being able to, and I think frequent touch points with a support person is what set this study apart from the rest in both, just, consistent guidance. So I would say that technically we would have to go head to head with a group of male and females where the variables are held the same. But the other piece that I would say about the women in the second publication is they had some degree of interaction, whereas our first study was conducted at a clinical research center, and it was very well controlled, and there was no interaction except with the nutritionists when they met with them weekly. So different variables, but yeah, we'll have to see. So I like to say that the ladies fared, they did on numbers, they fared a lot better, but we just don't know whether or not that's true, or if that's, difference in some of the tweaks we made.
I get that. Yeah. With those tweaks, there's a substantial enough tweaks that there's definitely room for debate there. I get it. I do love that somehow interaction happened more with the women's group than with the men's group.
Well, we controlled for it in the men's group, but yeah, it's kind of funny. If we both had them side by side and allowed interaction to happen, what would happen?
Exactly. And then
That's really funny.
would you be open to sharing a little bit about some of those interventions? And I know we're going to get deeper into this as
Yeah.
well. But in these two group studies, which again, these results are just phenomenal, like dramatically phenomenal.
It's so fascinating because when we created this program in our clinical practice, I was reading the science on epigenetics and I was incredibly interested in it. And at that time, most of it was around cancer. Cancer very efficiently takes over gene expression from us and turns on genes that drive cancer forward and turns off genes that protect us from cancer. And so that was my real first sort of aha around the power of epigenetics and what compelled me to think about how we might translate that science into clinical practice. How might that be actionable with our patients here? It was many years later. So that was around 2016, 2015, 2014. Biological age, was not changeable in humans. I mean, that's what the thinking was. So I didn't go into designing the program thinking I'm going to reverse bioage. I went into the program thinking, how can we optimize gene expression? So brick by brick, we designed a nutrition intervention where every forkful of food has compounds that help regulate gene expression. A diet, exercise intervention. We wanted people to sleep well. We had a meditation intervention. We had a couple of supplements that we'll talk about, but everything was brick by brick. How can we optimize gene expression? How can we optimize epigenetics? It was midway through our study because we wanted to see how we were tweaking epigenetics, but it was midway through that the first trial published on biological age reversal came out, and it was like time stood still in the scientific community. And it was only 9 men. It wasn't a controlled study. It was a year-long intervention. They used growth hormone injections, metformin, DHEA. It was a pretty intense protocol over the course of the year, and they reversed their biological age by, I think, about 2.5 years in that group of 9 men. So that was the first signal that biological age could be reversed in humans. It was huge, huge news. Nature picked it up, like all the big journals, scientific journal, everybody was talking about it. It was such big news. Like normally a journal of Nature's caliber wouldn't look at a 9-man, no control group study and write about it. But Horvath himself, the guy who developed these biological age clocks, was a part of that study. He helped crunch the clock data, and it got a lot of attention. So we knew we were going to look at biological age, but at the beginning half of our study, I certainly wasn't expecting we would see anything. I just knew we had the tools because we were looking at the epigenome to measure it. So why not? And so it was just huge for us to see that here we were, basically the second study out to show that we could change it.
And doubling in the female group, almost doubling what was found. And it sounds like maybe the interventions weren't as intense as the interventions that you saw in that first study.
Yeah, no drugs.
That's a lot of kind of Western intervention, a little bit.
Yeah. Metformin, growth hormone injections. I mean, it's an intense protocol, and ours is a diet and lifestyle intervention. Yeah, it's pretty simple.
Yeah, a lot simpler, a lot easier. I think a lot, like everyone who's listening, kind of like, an exhale happens of just like, gosh, like that doesn't necessarily feel attainable. I get that there's a lot of biohacking and a lot of things going on out there, but I think, the idea that it can be a lifestyle intervention that could reverse our biological age, that feels doable to the everyday person.
Yeah. And what was cool? One of the reviewers, when we submitted this for publication, one of our peer reviewers, so the other experts read and comment, said just that, like, this is broadly adoptable. They've crunched numbers on the economics of slowing the aging journey. because it's ridiculously expensive. We spend so much time really around the world, but we can look at the US. We on average at least 16 years, our final 16 years of life, we have multiple diagnoses. We're on multiple meds. Many of us are in extended care facilities or hospitalizations, or we've got health care or family taking care of us at home. Like, the journey of aging in this country is incredibly costly. It's very stressful, and the outcomes are horrible. Just to give you some numbers, there was a study that crunched the associated costs of reversing the biological age by slowing aging by simply a year, and it was trillions of savings. It's like trillions of dollars could be saved if we pay even a slight amount of attention to this. And so for that reason, and others, one of our peer reviewers just was like, this is broadly adoptable, and we need to get this information out, like provide people with the basic instructions on how to eat for optimal gene expression, for health span, for lifespan.
And I agree with you. I wouldn't have known that even a year of reversing biological age would save us that much money. But I do know that, by the time we're in our mid to late 40s, 93% of us have at least one marker for metabolic dysfunction, at least one, and then it really starts to just stack against us the older that we get.
Yes.
And
unless
it's,
we're unless
yes.
we're really intentionally choosing a different course.
Yeah. Well,
I mean,
okay.
go
Yeah.
ahead.
So I would love, so when you, the kind of the thing that I heard a second ago too, was that every bite of food really had the nutrients and the molecules, I'm guessing antioxidant profile, to really support beneficial epigenetics. And so I was thinking, are we talking about foods that are, I always think about foods that are feeding and protecting the gut and protecting the liver, obviously also protecting cellular health and mitochondrial health. But what does that look like? What can that look like for us?
Yeah, that's a great question. And yeah, all of those things. The nutrients that influence gene expression, that influence epigenetics, are what we call in science very pleiotropic, meaning they do a lot of stuff. So they're anti-inflammatory, they're antioxidant, they're anti-cancer, they're immune boosting and balancing. They're awesome sauce on the microbiome. So there are these foods that just do a lot. And what are they? Well, a lot of vegetables, no great surprise, a lot of greens, a lot of cruciferous and colorful fruits and veg, berries, peppers, all the variety of colorful peppers, radishes, just whatever you cruise through your farm, the farm stands that you guys have in abundance in your neck of the woods or anywhere, wherever anybody's listening. All those beautiful, currently ripening fruits and veg are incredibly important. So our diet was really, really dense in those. And they've got, and actually, before I go into why, other nutrients that are incredibly important in our program include, again, back to the polyphenols and the colorful things, green tea, turmeric, or curcumin and turmeric, resveratrol, rosmarinic acid and rosemary, quercetin, luteolin, et cetera. All of these gorgeous, beautiful phytochemicals are key players in regulating gene expression. We also wanted people to consume some protein, and animal protein, although I do have in the book, the yellow book back there, a vegetarian and vegan version. So if you don't eat animal protein, you can still do an intervention. But what we studied in our research did include animal protein. So clean sources. We want people to do eggs. Eggs have an incredibly important epigenetic nutrient called choline. Liver, if people are willing to do some liver, it is a multivitamin in a food matrix. I don't cook liver myself, but I'll take liver capsules. And you can get clean sourced, really pretty cheap
Yeah.
liver capsules
Yeah.
if you're
One of my
so
favorite
inclined.
companies, Paleo Valley, sells an
Hmm.
organ
Good.
meat blend that
Yes.
I love. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Paleo Valley is a good product. And I believe I mentioned them in the book because they do good quality stuff. Um, so nuts, seeds, good quality oils, mushrooms. Mushrooms are amazing. So even button mushrooms, but shiitake, maitake, all of them. Salmon, you and I were talking about the
Mm.
omega-3s that you're using. Clearly, omega-3s are really important in regulating gene expression. So good, clean, fatty fish is a part of the program as well. Probably the unique attributes are that it's very vegetable centric. And then, you have these additional nutrients together. These do something, these really regulate the key epigenetic mark called DNA methylation. So there's about 100 different ways we regulate gene expression, making which ones are on and off. One of the best studied and the most rigorous is something called DNA methylation. So the nutrients in this group are either making the methyl groups that we need to dot the DNA, or they're directing where those methyl groups are placed. So when there's a lot of these methyl groups, they look like red lollipops on strands of DNA. So just visualize that. When there's a lot of these red lollipops dotting a particular gene, that gene is inhibited. It can't be turned on. Those red lollipops are blocking it. We need a lot of red lollipops. Methylation is just happening all of the time in every cell of the body. And we've got about, at last count, maybe 30 million methylation sites on our DNA. So there's a ton of it. We need to be activating these, but we also need to be making sure these red lollipops are going on the genes we want off. So the
Right.
genes that drive cancer forward, the genes that drive inflammation forward, the genes that drive oxidative stress forward, the genes that, negatively influence the body, we want to inhibit those. And then conversely, we want the healthful guiding genes, the anti-inflammatory genes, the protective genes, et cetera. We want those to be able to be on. So we make the red lollipops, and then the other foods, the colorful fruits and veg, some of the compounds in mushrooms, some of the compounds in fatty fish, et cetera, those will sort of direct where that's happening. And one of probably the most exciting things in my study was that we didn't just increase the red lollipops, we moved them around so that the study population had a more youthful presentation of their epigenome than the control group. Like, it was just that simple. What we did in our intervention moved that activity around towards something more youthful.
That's incredible. And that it was so clear, right? That it was so clear to be able to see. Now, when we're talking about, there was obviously addition of a lot of polyphenols and phytonutrients and fiber and fatty fish and a lot of the things that are driving kind of, a reduction of inflammation and moving us in the right direction. Were there things that were a full body no, that were not allowed in this intervention? So I know that probably a lot of it was more the addition of things to making sure that this was in the diet, but were there things that you had removed from the diet? Like, was alcohol allowed? Was coffee allowed? Was processed sugar and ultra processed foods? Was any of that allowed at any level?
Super, super good question. So certainly what we pulled out is, likely as important as what we put in. Alcohol was excluded for this 8 weeks. And we call it the Younger You Intensive. The name of the book is Younger You. Yeah. And what we researched is the Younger You Intensive. But then people can transition onto what we call the Younger You Every Day. So you don't have to eat this way all the time. People are like, do I have to do this forever? I got a lot of pushback, and I'm like, no, we studied it for 8 weeks. That's what we studied it for. So you can transition onto the everyday. And if you want to have some alcohol, you can. We pulled grains, all grain from this. We pulled dairy, and, we pulled beans and legumes. But, we know blue zone folks living extremely healthy, well into their later years, consume legumes, they consume some alcohol, they consume some grain. And so I'm not going to turn the volume down on all of those for all of us, especially legumes. I think beans and legumes can play a really important role in a healthful diet. So we pulled them out for the 8-week intensive, mostly because I think people in this country are a little more vulnerable to doing poorly on them. Maybe it'll increase, glycemic cycling.
Or
Maybe
leaky
people have
gut.
yeah, GI distress,
Mhm.
something. Yeah. So we pulled it off during the intensive, but then during the everyday, we can certainly reintroduce them. But yeah, we did. And we didn't insist that people eat organic. If we did in our research study, we would have actually needed to supply them with the food, which would have been incredibly cost prohibitive. It was a really expensive study as it was, even though it's very small. Research is expensive, and I was blessed to get an unrestricted grant to do this study. So organics are definitely preferred. Clean source liver, obviously, really important, but we didn't require it. And that's kind of cool to me. It wasn't like,
That is very cool. That's great
yes,
news.
yeah,
I
that's
mean,
right.
that's a big celebration.
Yes.
We're hearing, I don't the recent study that came out that shows that there's a substantial amount of PFAS in kale, and maybe other, and so and more, it was more found in organic kale than conventional. But we're beginning
Did
to
they say
see
why?
that
It's interesting.
there's a lot of research into what it is. I think is it the kind of the bio sludge that they're turning into fertilizer that they believe
Oh
is
my God,
what,
is that what
yeah.
they suspected? So once
Mhm.
upon a time, biosludge was not allowed as an organic
It's
entity.
it's becoming
Yeah.
more and more and more. And I think there's just
Well,
crossover that's happening as well. Um,
well, I think that, I mean, the USDA regulations, I think, have just been sort of chiseled down. I mean,
yeah,
once upon a time, they weren't,
as
I mean,
they were more
they
stringent.
were, yeah, they were more stringent. Yeah. They wanted to try to get biosyn many, many years ago, but there was this massive uproar, actually.
Mm.
I remember it well. Yeah. Oh my God. Isn't that fascinating? So now
It's
now they're
fascinating and
allowing
gross.
it.
So yeah,
Yeah.
we're just
It's really
it's a
disappointing.
debate and a wonder of,
Yeah.
uh and the question was, well, what can we eat? And
Right.
I mean, what
Well,
can we
let
do?
me say
Yeah.
something interesting. What you've just said, I think, is an important and really disappointing point. Like, we shouldn't allow this biosludge into organic farming, and hopefully, farmers and labels will guide us as to what's appropriate. But one of the cool things about eating a healthful selection of nutrients, regardless of whether they're organic or not, is that some of the compounds within them detox us from the very same problem, chemicals that we're being exposed to. So there's this guy out of University of Kentucky, a research scientist, Bernard Hennig, who studies this phenomena. So for instance, he studies the influence of fish oil on the toxicity of PCBs. And you can see that fish oil, shuts down the mechanism, the PCB inflammation driving mechanism in the body. It's amazing. So one of the ways that PCBs exert their toxins is by increasing the pro-inflammatory eicosanoids, that we see in arachidonic acid, that,
Mhm.
just exquisitely pro-inflammatory prostaglandins. They're like the most,
We are
and
most, yeah.
leukotrienes, the most pro-inflammatory compounds in the body. PCBs will drive these compounds forward. Omega-3s will inhibit that PCB driven pro-inflammatory effect. So, and this is regardless of whether, something's organic or not. We're going to get more bang for our buck in general in
Yes.
organic, but we
Agreed.
can see that conventional is still, providing us some of those nutrients. So I think it's good that we were able to show success without requiring organic.
I do too. I think because a lot of people, no, they can't afford it. And then I
They
think
can
what
afford
ends up
it.
happening is like, well, if I can't afford organic, then I make these other decisions, maybe
Yeah.
more towards the direction of ultra processed foods that are really not moving us forward. And so, if it's conventional, then do it. I think really, what I always recommend is rotating. rotating your kale with spinach and mixed greens and arugula, and just really creating a
Yeah.
lot of rotation. And even within the seasons, lots of rotating, as many polyphenols as you can, and as many different types of the colors of the rainbow that you
Yeah.
can. And that way we create more diversity. I forget what the one of the gosh, trying to forget what association it is, but the recommendation for kind of boosting microbiome diversity is really incorporating 30 different types of plant foods into your diet every single week. And so that's always the goal for us in our house of, and that's all plants, it could even be chia seeds, like just making
Yeah.
sure that you have, 30 different types of plant foods, herbs, spices, veggies, cruciferous veggies, fruits, different types of fiber sources. And as long as you've got that diversity, you can really help to support not only your microbiome diversity, but also kind of really support that cellular engine.
That's awesome. Yeah, I absolutely, I think that's fabulous. And to your point there, and by the way, I was just writing down the whole kale biosludge thing. I need to look it up. I'm just so disappointed to hear
It
that.
is, yeah.
But it's, yeah. In the book, we have a 30-page epinutrient appendix. So to your point of getting 30 different types of fruit and veg in per day. The appendix is this massive, really cool, one-of-a-kind resource that has, tons and tons of these nutrients. And one of the nice things about this is people who are anxious about starting a new dietary pattern. And I was doing a lot of interviews in very, very mainstream settings when the book was first published. And I would get this question a lot, people scared and overwhelmed that it's going to be this crazy diet and it's going to be so different. And I would just say, look at the nutrient appendix. Go in there with a highlighter and you can see you're
All
already
the things.
doing a lot right. And to
Yeah.
your point, you talking about herbs and spices, those are epinutrient powerhouses. So we call all of these nutrients that are able to modify gene expression epinutrients, and they're everywhere.
They really are.
And we can make sure that we're eating them in adequate amounts in every forkful. I mean, I think we have a responsibility to.
I agree. I agree. And so the only people always ask me, how long do I need to stay on this protocol? I have a lot of protocols. It's probably maybe not as stringent. I work with a lot of women with autoimmune conditions and struggling with maybe a diagnosis of prediabetes. And we're just really having to walk things back. But obviously, like, that underpinning is inflammation and oxidative stress. And, I put women on, usually 30 to 60-day protocols, and really just have them take a look at how they're feeling, what's going on with their body, just really create that mind body connection. But the question I always get is, well, when can I go back? And I'm like, I really want you to feel into how you're feeling, and just slowly maybe try to integrate some of these things in. But what you may find is that some of these foods just may not ever serve you again, or at least at the capacity that you were consuming them. And that I really encourage, inspire, us to eat more in the direction of what you're talking about in this 8-week study,
Yeah.
with exceptions. Obviously there's birthday parties, and obviously there's New Year's Eve, but
Right.
alcohol is off the table for me. For ultra processed foods and ultra processed sugar, grains, dairy, there's just certain foods that I know aren't serving my future brain, definitely not serving my future gut and liver. And if I really want to have extended longevity, to reverse my biological age, and to push back even 4 to 5 years of any kind of chronic condition that may be coming down the pike, I know that eating this way and adopting some of the lifestyle habits that I hope we're going to get into as well is what's going to get me there. And even though we all are very diverse, it's kind of my recommendation that it's what's going to get a lot of us there.
Yeah, that's right. And there's a possibility for endless diversity in our program. But yeah, to your point, the ball's in our court. How well we will live, how well we will spend our final years, whether we really get to have this robust health span that we all want. You know,
We
we
all want
all
it.
want it. We all
Yes.
want it desperately. We don't want to take our hard-earned money and savings that we want to pass on to our kids and use it for, you know, big pharma, hospitals, extended care facilities. Like, we don't want that to be our fate. But the reality is, unless we really very intentionally make the choices to embrace this way of being, you know, that's likely going to be where we end up. I mean, that's where
That's where we
everybody
are
ends
ending
up
up.
in this. And yeah, I
That's where we
know
are,
it is.
especially women, where
It's
we lead the
brutal.
pack in cardiovascular disease. We lead it in Alzheimer's and dementia. We lead it in autoimmunity. We lead it in, you know, again, stroke and cardiac arrest. And we lead it in type 2 diabetes.
Yeah, it's brutal.
It's
Wow.
brutal. And
Wow.
that's
I
women.
did not know that we were leading the charge, and so
All of it,
brutal. It's so
all
brutal.
of that.
But you know what's amazing too? We also, like, when I look at the early adopters, so after our research study, when we started launching this, here, you know, we do remote work, but you know, in our clinic, I mean, it's women who are adopting this. I mean,
Oh,
it's
I know.
women who are paying attention to the work that we're doing. I mean, there's men are in the longevity space and very into it. Like, when you think of biohacker,
Biohacking. Yeah.
you
But
tend
we
to
were
think of
really the
men.
ultimate biohackers. I mean, let's just talk about our menstrual cycle and how we had to figure all of that out, you know, without
That's
a lot
right.
of modern medicine helping us out for a very
Yeah.
long
Yeah,
time.
yeah, 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 for sure. And the early adopters of this work, you know, the people who really get it are
Or
women.
women.
So we may lead the charge in the negative, but we definitely have the influence. And we're the ones still tending to do the shopping for the family and making those really important decisions for all of us. So we're the ones who can change the paradigm, I think. You know, we can really get in
Oh,
there
I
and
do
change it.
agree. I think that women are leading the charge. I know that Dr. Bland is definitely the father of functional medicine. But when I look at the functional medicine doctors out there in the world, it's so many of us are women. And I
Yeah.
just want to just point that out as well. I think because we
Yeah.
really do see, you know, when we look at, I mean, we're kind of the movers of our communities, we're the glues of our family, and we really
Yeah.
do see what's going to make a difference in our family and in our communities' lives. And there's something to be said
Good.
about that.
You say it. I love it. I love it. It's important. I think it's very important women get the shout outs that they deserve. And speaking of that, let me just say this. It's popping in my head because we're focusing this and our energy on women, and that's what your work is. There's this amazing exercise physiologist named Stacy Sims, and I
Oh, yeah.
podcasted with her. She's such a badass.
She's
And
coming on in
is
2 weeks.
she going to be on? So
Yes.
she has an exquisite, I'm going to give her a plug. She has an exquisite understanding of how the exercise experience for women needs to be designed for women. And so you're going to get that when you interview her. And it was game changing for me and game changing for so many of my listeners. I mean, it's really different. So I think it's going to be a great podcast.
Oh, I'm so excited. I know we're not
Yeah.
going to spend as much time in, you know, kind of, the exercise physiology around our menstrual cycle. I know we're going to touch upon it. A lot of my women are very much in kind of that perimenopause into menopause where that transition's happening. And what does that look like in terms
Well,
of extending? Yes.
it's
Yeah.
similar. I mean,
Yeah.
she's going to really point out clear differences in, you know, being a woman at any stage in the journey versus training
As a man.
as a man.
Yeah.
That's right. And which is what we've been doing. So I think what she has to say is really nothing short of revolutionary.
I'm so excited. Yeah, no, the system wasn't built for us, you know, and
Yeah.
the work system, the, fitness world, like so much wasn't built around our cycle, our cyclical nature. And I'm so glad that we're finally harnessing what I call a superpower. And she's doing such a great job in leading the charge. But I have both of her books right here, right in front of me as I'm preparing for that interview too. And I'm so excited about talking about that next level. Like, how do we maintain or even optimize muscle mass as we head into perimenopause and menopause? We maintain that strength and that endurance, so that we can be the sages and the wisdom givers to our family and communities, because that's where we really shine. Often when we're being diminished by society, is where we're really, really rising to the occasion of our knowledge base. And so I just love how she really poises us to really own our strength and own our power, not only physically, but also on a mental level as we step into this new incredible journey.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, she's definitely an amazing woman. I want to touch on it. I don't know how much time we have left, but exercise is an essential component of our program. So just circling back to her message, but we wanted it again to be broadly adoptable by anybody. There's a lot of folks in our community who just simply need to get off the couch,
Yeah.
right? Or get
And
off
walk.
the chair. That's
Yeah.
right. That's right. So our exercise intervention was just 30 minutes minimum, 5 days a week, doing whatever you want, where your perceived exertion is about 60 to 80% of your max. So a 60% perceived exertion is you can still carry on a conversation. Maybe you're just lightly perspiring, but it doesn't have to be really intense and you're doing whatever you want. So for my mom who follows our program, that's gardening. For me, I'm a cyclist. I can get right into 60 to 80% on my bike easily. And that's the minimum of what we wanted our people to do. So a minimum of 30 minutes, 5 days a week in that range. Today, as the Younger You program evolves, to your point, we need to have good muscle mass. So we need to be engaging in resistance training. We need to, keep cardiovascular health in tip-top shape. And so, some kind of interval training can be important. Again, appropriate for the individual. But in our research study, we kept our exercise prescription really simple. This research on exercise and optimizing gene expression is awesome. It's powerful. One exercise event can favorably change gene expression. Like it's that potent.
Wow.
Whereas like if you're doing it regularly, of course, you'll have that, multifold over. The information that our body houses on our genes from our exercise is handed to our offspring. So if we're
Yeah.
pre-conception, some of that information, and that would be associated with metabolic benefit, cardiovascular benefit, muscle benefit, that information we can give to our offspring. Sometimes I like to joke that our kids can have like 6 packs, come into this world with 6 packs, but which isn't actually true, but it's kind of funny.
I feel like my little guy's got a little 4-pack. He's a lean, mean toddler machine.
That's awesome. That is so awesome. Yeah, my little one is super, super strong also. Exercise changes gene expression almost like a bowl of beautiful greens and colorful veg. Like exercise acts like a veg. So when we look at the gene expression changes, they mimic what we see, in a really
Wow.
healthy eating pattern. It's extraordinary. And the final thing that I want to say about it, plugging exercise, is that the older we get, the more genetic expression benefit. So the more favorable epigenetic changes we'll see the older we get. So there is no time like the present to start. And it doesn't matter how old we are. In fact, the older we are, the better,
That's
according to
incredible.
some really cool science. Yeah.
Well, I feel like it answered my question because one of the first questions I was going to ask was, with all of the different types of modifications that you brought in, lifestyle modifications, like, where was the juice worth the squeeze? And my gut always tells me it's nutrition,
Right.
but exercise following right behind it. And some people could argue reducing stress and sleep, but I find those two components are so powerful. But I always lean towards food, that
Yes.
you're making that decision more frequently than
Yes.
you're maybe making the exercise. But it sounds like maybe they're pretty comparable
Well, let
side
me
by
give you
side.
another. It was fun when I was, just doing endless amounts of interviews because the astute interviewer asks me that question all the time. But of course we don't know because it's a multivariable study.
Right.
Let me tell you about stress though. Let me tell you about it because it really blew my mind when I got into the literature around it. First of all, meditation, a single meditation event can favorably change gene expression, and people who are practice meditators are biologically younger. So it also profoundly changes gene expression. Stress is a pro-aging phenomenon. So
Yes.
we can hand stress patterns on our genome down to our offspring as well. We can hand down trauma, the influence of PTSD. Unfortunately, we can I'm actually sure we can hand down resilience patterns as well. But of course, those haven't been as studied.
I was going to say we're not studying that.
Exactly. That's exactly right. So it's incredibly important that we do and that we understand what resiliency looks like in gene expression. But an incredibly interesting aha for me was looking at the biological age clock that we used in our study, the Horvath, sort of the flagship clock. it looks at 353 different of those red lollipops, 353 methylation marks, and glucocorticoid response elements accounts for 25% of the clock. There's no other variable that has as potent a response. And so that to me suggests, at least for this clock, stress is driving it. And
Yeah.
it made me really think about stress as being like gasoline on the fire of aging. So I don't know that we can understate, the influence of stress on the aging experience. And now there are subsequent studies that have come out showing the influence of stress. I mean, certainly we know the influence of stress on the chronic diseases of aging and, so on and so forth. And even when we inherit,
I mean, we can
stress
see
patterns.
stress on a continuous glucose monitor. We can see it
Yeah,
profoundly
that's right. That's
impact,
right.
right? Hyperinsulinemia. We know that cortisol co-elevates insulin. I mean, we really do see it play out,
Absolutely.
in real time. If someone's
Mhm.
wearing some of these devices, even the Whoop strap now has the ability to measure your stress 24/7. And that's an enlightening experience for sure. But it's really fascinating the way that our bodies, metabolically get ready,
Respond
gear
to
up and
stress.
respond to stress
Yeah.
in a really in what it considered to be a very negative way, because it's a lot of oxidative stress on the back end of that.
Yeah, it's incredibly important. So when we look at all the different variables and the antidote to stress, some sort of a meditation practice, of course, exercise, connection, community, all of these things that are the antidotes to stress have evidence in the literature for protecting us, slowing our biological age, to reversing patterns of gene expression associated with diseases and so on and so forth. So we know all of the interventions, I think, in our study are, really equally, for their own set of arguments, very important. And then sleep.
And sleep.
We tracked people's sleep. We wanted them to get good quality sleep. We can't make people sleep well. But we could give them sleep hygiene tips and, just kind of talk about making sure they have enough runway to get a good amount of sleep at night and making sure their room is appropriately arranged, et cetera, et cetera. So sleep is another huge thing, and same thing. People who are not sleeping are aging faster. Insomniacs are biologically older, unfortunately. And again, we know from the work from, Matthew Walker and other sleep scientists that it's, poor sleep is associated with all of the chronic diseases of aging as well. And we can turn it around, when we take the time to kind of figure out sleep for us.
Yeah, when we put our phones down before bed.
Yeah,
One of the things I learned many years ago was that sleep really starts when you wake up. And nobody wants to hear that. But like, you reset your circadian rhythm the second you wake up. And how can you kind of reset and support cortisol and melatonin? And that's getting outside within about an hour of waking. And that's how we start
yeah,
to really kind of gear ourselves up for a better night's sleep, later in the day. But yeah, it's, when it comes to sleep, like so many of these other lifestyle practices, is it's intentional, you know?
that's right. That's right. So when we designed the program, we couldn't, or when we had an opportunity to study it, it didn't make any sense for us to remove, any variable, even though it would be fabulous to be able to know what the secret sauce is. And we all have our own ideas, but I think every piece is essential.
Hmm. This is powerful. Now, one of the things I wanted to share, because I know that your book is available, so we're going to have the book inside of the show notes as well. But you have a program where you've made this available
Yeah.
to all of us, and so
Yeah.
can you talk a little bit
Yeah.
about that?
Yeah. So
That we can actually put this into practice. It's one thing for us to talk about the research and the data and kind of what came of this, but this has been happening in real time for the general population for a couple of years now.
yeah, so you can work with our nutritionists, the same amazing nutritionists who worked with our research participants, the same group. I mean, they're just absolutely terrific. And I pop in and join you, but we have a group program, and it's at an affordable price point. We wanted it to be, again, broadly adaptable. We want everybody to be able to do this who's called to do it. So yeah, can include a link in the show notes to that. And in fact, we also have a fun biological age quiz that you can take for free. And you're going to include a link to that as well.
Well,
So
I
you
think
can,
that's the next thing is everyone wants to know, well, where do I land on
yeah,
this spectrum? And
yeah.
with the hopes that we are hopefully younger than our chronological age. And so the first step I would say is go and take the assessment, go and take the questionnaire,
Mhm.
see where you land. I mean, I think we're
Yes.
all curious. I know I am. I'm going to go fill out the questionnaire.
Yeah, it's
And
fun.
then, yeah. And then from that step, I mean, one, you're going to be learning a lot about the research that you do as well. But if you are wanting to take it to the next step, if for some reason you are feeling like chronic conditions are knocking on your door, or you just want to extend your longevity and your biological age,
Yeah,
this is one of the
do it.
few programs that are actually like significantly backed by research, and beautifully backed by research. And so I just want to encourage anyone
Thanks.
listening right now to go and check it out. You deserve that. And at the very least, go and get the book so that you
Yeah.
have that appendix, right? And
Yeah, it's
get
fun.
that
Yeah.
marker out, right? Where you're
Yeah.
highlighting, oh my gosh, I'm actually, because I
I'm
think,
eating a lot. I'm already
yes.
doing a lot. And where can I kind of add in some more? Yeah, it's pretty cool. It is. It's really cool. And if you want, you can certainly, you can test your biological age through us as well. If you do the group program, that's one way that you can do it. Yeah, there's a lot of ways that we can enter into this conversation, and me and my team are definitely here to support.
Well, I just want to say thank you so much for your
Thank you.
brilliance, for your mission and purpose, for moving us forward. This is the kind of research, these are the types of programs that literally change our lives in such a profound way. I think
Yeah.
all of us, so many of us, we want to be grandmas, and we want to be the favorite grandma, the
Yeah.
grandma that's running around, right? The grandma
Yeah.
that's got so much energy, like we're dusting the other grandma. And
So
so,
cool.
I mean, that's my why for sure.
Yeah.
And there's got to be intention and lifestyle interventions. Like you said, there's no better
Yeah.
time than the present to start to make these changes. And I believe for every single one of us listening, the time is now.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I absolutely agree with you. Thanks so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much too. Have a beautiful day.
Thanks.